Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to Runs and Acceleration for our new podcast with your hosts, Ruhan and Akash. This podcast is really special because it's the future of F1 podcast and it comes at a time where we are having the first sprint race tonight at Silverstone. But we've also had the new car launch for the 2022 season as F1 moves into a new era, one which is committed towards sustainability and diversity because they also launched the diversity and inclusion program just this week. And I think, Akash, that's something that you want to
Mhm.
start from, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So just a little bit of context for everyone about this. So the diversity and inclusion program was introduced by both Lewis Hamilton, the current the world last season's world champion, and then also Roman Grosjean, who was a driver on the 2020 grid. But now it's there was a lot of like ideation, but now it's like actually been really proposed that they want to make F1 much more diverse. Get a little bit more diversity inside for in terms of drivers, just in terms of staff and everything. So I mean, in my opinion, I think this is a great push. Great to see that we're having some more talks about diversity and inclusion, given everything that's been going on in our world last few years now. So I'm just quite excited to see where our future is going to be right now. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the future, we have some new tracks which are coming up and have already been confirmed. The first one starts this year, which is Saudi. Saudi hosts a night race in the city, and that's supposed to be a really interesting one. They're saying it's going to be the fastest street circuit in Formula
Yeah.
One. So,
hmm Yeah. We'll have to see how much how interesting that. I'm really hoping that this is going to be a good race for a good race, but we'll have to see because there's a lot. I think there's a lot of changes coming to F1 um and it can be sometimes a little bit. We're getting the one thing I think with this is that when we bring in new circuits, that means we're saying goodbye to some of the old circuits.
yes.
I know that this one for this season, they've officially canceled both the Singapore Grand Prix and the Australian Grand Prix. Usually,
Yes.
Australian Grand Prix is the first Grand Prix, so it's quite iconic. It kicks off the F1 season usually. So and also Singapore Grand Prix, it's something that's very, I think, very true both of our hearts because we both live in Singapore. I used to live in Singapore, but I think the one thing is
Yes.
but I think generally it's just a fun street circuit. It's kind of like an extended Monaco if you want to think about that, like that. But I don't know.
And
It's kind of
Singapore is
sad that.
also known for one of the more complete Formula One
Yeah.
experiences for street circuit because, like, we're having Silverstone this week where people go out and camp during the weekend. There's
hmm
a lot of attendance, one of the largest crowds you see. Singapore has that as well, even though it's in the city, and there's no tenting, but because it happens with some of the best concerts, you have a lot of big artists coming in.
hmm
It just makes for a great experience of F1 versus with the city of Singapore itself, and it's
Yeah.
really an entertaining race that way.
Yeah.
Um, it has been cancelled 2 years in a row, and Australia as well cancelled not particularly because of COVID, but there were some logistics planning issues that were happening related to that, but just generally because you have to shut down some of the streets and stuff. So
hmm
I think yeah, that's my question to you, which is as we're moving more towards this street circuits, do you think it's really sustainable? Because all of these cities, and Singapore's cited this as a concern that shutting down the city for a week um, is a bit of a challenge, especially for a small island like them. Similarly for Australia, so can we have more street races? Is it something that can be managed over years to come?
hmm Oh, I think it's tricky because in my opinion, I think when for fans just in general or just anyone who's going to be watching F1, I think it's much more interesting when you're seeing cars going through like going through in cities. You can see like skyscrapers in the background. I think it just leads to um, that better kind of aesthetic. But I just feel that with street circuits, it's that number one is it's happening in cities, so you immediately get those that city gets like kind of popular. You get a lot of tourists coming there. It's easier for tourists to come into cities and going out to
Absolutely.
all these other places. So I don't know. I would I still have that kind of feeling in me that I personally like a balance of both city and just regular, just normal circuits. So I think we're getting that, but what I do fear is that F1 is gonna maybe not in the next 5 years, maybe in the next 10 years, I would have to say something like that, where it gets so much to the point where almost 60 to 70% of the races are all at city circuits. And I think sometimes sometimes city circuits, they all have a kind of general flow. We kind of understand sometimes how they're going to go. But I just hope it's that there's a culture, there's a heritage that comes with these circuits, with the Spa, with the Monza, those kinds of circuits.
And also a certain brand of racing that comes with them, because street circuits, the biggest thing is when you're using the roads of a city, you have to barricade all around them, which means there's not a runoff area. It's a very narrow track, and with the cars getting wider than ever, it's becoming really hard to overtake. Monaco and Singapore are already seeing these problems. And the next three are all city circuits. So you have Saudi, St. Petersburg in Russia, and obviously Miami's been announced as well. So which among the three do you pick? And can you guess the one I'm most looking forward to?
I think for me, and I think for you also, I'm gonna say Miami. I don't know. I feel that Miami is probably. I mean, first of all, for you, I think mainly because I'm guessing because of your shirt right now, because of that.
Already there, mentally there.
Yeah. But for me, I think Miami because one, they haven't released. I don't think they've released an official street like a circuit, but there's like a little like little rumors and
a
stuff
little
like that.
bit of a idea,
yeah, little rumors and stuff like that, and it seems like pretty interesting. And it's also like I know like like in Florida, there's like racing is actually really really popular. So that's why I feel that you might get some really good fans and everything there. So I think that's what I'm really excited for. I personally don't really know anything really about like what are the fans really like in Saudi Arabia or what the fans are like in St. Petersburg. So I'm more tending towards Miami, but I'm personally just hoping that all three of them are going to be interesting. So that's
absolutely.
So it'll be really fun. Yeah.
I think future of F1 depends as much on the sport as it does on the drivers and teams. So teams, obviously, we know a lot of them are sticking for the next few years at least. And interesting news coming up that for the 2025 engine regulations, Porsche and Audi have cited their interest to maybe return as engine manufacturers. Maybe. And if not as engine manufacturers, maybe as team. Alfa Romeo already signed a new deal with Sauber to keep the name in the sport. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I think it's also kind of needed right now because we're having only around basically almost what is it? It's really only the Mercedes engine, the Ferrari, and only Renault and only Alpine uses the Renault engine. That's it.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's only three.
Because Honda's leaving the sport. Yeah, Honda's leaving the sport.
Honda's going to be leaving the sport also. Yeah, forgot about Honda. Yeah, but yeah, Honda's probably going to be leaving the sport. So, look, I think just having right now 4 manufacturers is really not enough. Is probably not enough in my opinion. I think there should be a little bit more, just that we have that little bit more competition. And also, I think there has to be that kind of thing where it's not just one team using one manufacturer. Like it should be a little bit more spread out. I think Mercedes right now, it's Mercedes, Williams, Aston Martin, and McLaren. Yeah, so that's 4 teams. That's almost half of the teams in the grid. Yeah. So so I think that's where it kind of gets a little bit too much for me. But yeah, I think with Audi and Porsche coming in as engine manufacturers, that definitely creates a little bit more. I would say a little bit more excitement for me personally, because you can get some interesting, you get like some really good car manufacturers coming in. So hopefully it comes out really nice. So I think one thing we can kind of move on is talking about, you kind of hinted at this before, is now we can talk about a little bit more about the drivers themselves of what, I mean, we're seeing. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that we literally have now that we're expecting like young 20-year-olds and 21, 22-year-olds, and we're expecting them to perform day in and day out. I think that's like almost amazing right now what we're seeing with guys like Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc,
Absolutely.
is that they have that there's that expectation that they have to perform. So I mean, do you see them being like someone that they're already going to be like, they're going to be consistent, even if they're going to be racing for the next 10 years, 15 years, or whatever it may be? Or do you see like the next generation coming in, really, making their stamp on like basically like, building their authority
Yeah.
in the sport? Yeah.
I think Verstappen and Leclerc have already made their mark. Verstappen obviously leading the championship, and I think it's his sixth year in Formula One. He's finally come into his own, and we're
Yeah.
all expecting that maybe the title's finally going to go to him. And it will at some point, because I genuinely think he's a multiple world champion throughout his career. He will be. Similarly for Leclerc, his fourth season now, and he's doing some amazing things with
Yep.
what he's been given, out driving his car at every possible opportunity last year, this year, because the Ferrari's not been that quick. The other one is, I think Lando Norris started out as this, like a quick nick kind of guy who's gonna get you a few podiums, win some races, be entertaining, like Ricardo is his teammate. But you didn't see the potential for a world champion. But now, if you look at it, the way he's going, almost third in the championship with the McLaren,
Yep.
I think he's starting to change a lot of people's minds. And at the age he's at, he could be another possible world champion. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I think find really interesting about Lando is that I mean, number one is his consistency, but the thing is, I'm also just trying to like assess his future. Like, is he? I personally think that I think McLaren are going to keep him for a long time. But also, I mean, knowing that McLaren and Mercedes have with the engine partnership and everything right now, could we see a Lando possibly taking up that second seat at Mercedes in the future? I don't know. It's a possibility. It's my.
There's one concern with that. The one concern is another talented youngster named George Russell.
Yeah,
I saw his lap yesterday, reaching Q3 now, 2 weeks in a row in a Williams, and in front of his home fans, they went berserk.
I actually think that's almost ridiculous. Like that's actually just ridiculously good. Seriously, it's the second. It's probably the second worst car of the grid, and it's incredibly tough to even get out of Q1. But this guy's putting it in Q2. Sorry, in Q3. So wow. I mean, no, that's.
And he went for his lap in Q3. That's what the commentators, Crofty and all, said, that it seemed like it really seemed like a celebration lap or a parade lap, because everyone was cheering him on, his home fans. And this is another great thing which I think is related to racetracks more than city circuits, because when you have racetracks with the big grandstands and a lot of viewing areas, you get to see that crowd support which we saw yesterday at Silverstone, because it's a very educated F1 crowd. They knew what was going on, what he was achieving, and even though he qualified 8th, the applause he got at the end of it was just amazing. And he was actually, I looked at the stats, he was 0.15, so a tenth and a half of a second off fourth place.
My God. Wow.
In a Williams.
Yeah, in a Williams. I mean, I think the one thing is just so unfortunate is that I just want to see this guy put into like a Mercedes, like as what you were saying, put into a Mercedes or put into a McLaren or something like that. I just want to see him go to a better team, because I think if he's driving this well in a Williams, like given the current state of the car is not that great.
Yes.
Just imagine him even just one step up. This he could be scoring a lot of points. And one thing is also, I think, that he's being really, really consistent. And I mean, like, I think for Williams, they were expecting at least the threshold to be pushing it like, out of Q1.
Absolutely.
But him, going above and beyond and going into Q3, man, it's just ridiculous. I think I'm personally, I think for me, I think Lando's one driver. I mean, aside from Verstappen and Leclerc, but I think for me, George Russell, just because, he's in the smaller, no, he doesn't really get talked about as much as compared to the other three. I think I'm probably more excited for him than any other driver. Yeah.
You talk about pushing the threshold, and that's where a concern for me comes in, because when you look at the teams like Williams, you have one guy who's pushing and giving it his all to reach Q3, whereas there's the other guy who gets sometimes qualifies last, comes last in the race, Nicholas Latifi. Not a bad driver, but if we were to be honest, he's not reached F1 purely on his talent.
Yeah.
He's another story of what's becoming a common narrative in F1, which is the billionaire club,
Yeah.
where people who have a lot of connections are able to secure a spot in the team. It's called paying for your seat. It's very common in F1, but
Yeah.
it's becoming more and more the norm today, which is a little concerning for the young drivers who come from communities like Lewis Hamilton came from, or you know Carlos Sainz is an exception, but most of the other people came from where they had to work and
Esteban Ocon. I think Esteban Ocon
Esteban
is one.
Ocon.
Yeah. I remember that they were talking about that in Drive to Survive. So that's I was thinking about non-paid drivers, but yeah, you not mentioned Nicholas Latifi. Also now with Haas, they've got they have Mick Schumacher,
Nikita.
but then they've got Nikita Mazepin, or has not.
But Schumacher, important to note, he won
Mhm.
every single championship and earned his super license points and
Yeah,
everything.
exactly. No, that's what I'm trying to get at. Is that it's I don't know. I mean, it kind of goes to that question: is like, do these people actually like do they deserve the seat? Because I think that when you ask that kind of question, those people I know, because one person I'm questioning a little bit more is if that deserve the seat is with someone like Lance Stroll. He's at Aston Martin right now, and
Yes.
he didn't have, let's say, the greatest start to F1. I mean, he got that. I remember when he was at Williams, he got that podium um, in Baku, and like that was really it. I mean, and then he came to Racing Point and everything like that. His father kind of established the team, invested into the team, and owns the team
And
essentially.
bought Aston Martin.
Exactly, and then bought Aston Martin. But I think from the 2020 season is because like Racing Point had a really decent car. You could see that there was an improvement. There was someone, he's not just like this kid of like a billionaire. He's not just there because my dad did this for me, but he's really there because he has that kind of talent. So I think sometimes maybe it's like let's not judge a book like too fast, like based on its cover. I think we need to give them a little bit of time, but then there's like in my opinion, I think there's like some limits, and I think
That's
I
where
have like
Mazepin comes.
I think that's where I have to like kind of give my thing with Mazepin, because I mean, I've been talking a little bit too much about this, but like, what are your thoughts? I mean, like about Nikita Mazepin. There's a lot to kind of.
I don't know if I should call him Mazepin or Mazespin. Um, it's no. Besides the memes, it's memes are one thing, and he has spun a lot for any driver in Formula One. He spins every weekend multiple times, which means he has no control of the car. Mick Schumacher is driving the same car, and I know it's a difficult car to drive, but come on, it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
Um, and to be honest, when you have all this, he has all the support he can get. His father's involvement with the team, or let's just say his father basically owning the team.
Yeah.
He will be given a little bit of preferential treatment when it comes to more upgrades. And so far, I have not seen him out qualify Mick once on pure pace. He's finished behind Mick in every race. He's caused quite a few serious incidents. Almost half the field has expressed concerns over the way he drives. Blue
Yeah.
flags, not just in the race, but qualifying practice, making some very dangerous moves.
Yep.
I've seen him in Formula 2. I know he has a style of driving. Some will call edgy. Some may use the word dirty. It's not one that can be fancied because I've seen him push drivers off the track, and he's doing this again. He almost did it
Yep.
with Mick at Baku.
Yep.
So I'm really concerned about having some drivers who they might be quick in some regard, but they don't have the racecraft.
Hmm.
Um, and just because they are coming from a certain background, for them to get access to an F1 seat over many more deserving drivers,
Yep.
like you have a Liam Lawson, a Daruwala, all these guys in the academies who don't have seats for them, but they're
Yep.
people who are getting in on base
Hmm.
counts.
I think this is like, this kind of thing of, boosting people a little too quickly. We kind of saw that with like, I remember with Pierre Gasly when he moved from Toro Rosso to Red Bull. It was a little too much for him. He couldn't control that car as well. And then he came back down to Toro
Yes.
Rosso where a little bit more
That's the only
comfortable.
thing I haven't fully passed my judgment on Mazepin, because I can understand that, sometimes it does happen. People have varying
Yeah.
starts to their career. So far, it is seeming like a narrative of being one of those that gets forgotten in a hurry, or
Yeah.
is people forced themselves to forget it.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, that's why like I feel
speaking
that
of
even
Gasly, yeah,
I mean I'll just finish on that and we can
yes,
go to Pierre Gasly, but I'll just finish on this. I think that when you're looking at these drivers, we can judge them, but I feel like when you're looking at new driver, we can judge them, but there still has to be a little bit like they still have to be performing like at just at a basic standard. And
yeah,
in my opinion, I don't think Mazepin is performing at that standard. And look, I I think this is becoming the trend in F1 with these paid drivers, and I really hope we can try. Hopefully, these because I don't see this like going away because the sport is revolved around getting these investments and everything like that. So
yes.
I just hope that we can see a little bit more. These next hopefully the next generation of these paid drivers that are coming in. Hopefully, you know they're really good with they're good with their racecraft. Yeah.
Yeah. See, it's always going to be a challenge with F1 because F1 is a sport where a lot of money is involved. So,
Hmm.
with sponsorships and stuff. So you need to have people backing you.
Yeah.
You need to have the resources. And just to compete in a season of not Formula One, Formula
Hmm.
3, which is a regional level of the sport, it
Yep.
takes a million bucks every
Hmm.
year just to stay in that sport. I don't think there's many drivers out there who themselves or their families can afford
Hmm.
to stay in F1. And I was reading something interesting about the women's series that's now going on. So, for those who don't know, Formula One also runs a concurrent series, an all female racing series called the W Series. And the
Yep.
point we want to bring up is a few of those drivers had given up their careers, really talented female drivers, but
Hmm.
they had to give up their careers because there were no opportunities for them. Again, money was one. Getting into F1 is a bit of a challenge. It has been definitely. But you had people who during the off season I heard were going with their parents as like carpenters to find work because
Hmm.
that's the places they come from, and they aspire to be at the top flight of the sport so they can make a difference in their own lives and for their families. So
Hmm.
are we taking that away? The way the sport is going is a possible question.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay. Yep. I think it's now we can go to Pierre Gasly.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. I mean, let's see. I don't. I think with Gasly, it's really interesting because one, I see him. Everyone's one day, I think because like he's becoming so consistent in AlphaTauri, out driving the car amazingly well. Becoming so consistent, becoming just really liked by the fans in general. I I always see that. I think a lot of people think that he's gonna one day get that second seat at Red Bull, and he's gonna go back home essentially, or like where
And
where
redeem
it's he's
himself.
where he's destined to go back. And but in my opinion, I just don't see it that way. I think AlphaTauri want to hopefully try to bring their team up to the level of where we can compete with the top teams and have
Yes.
Pierre Gasly as our main guy. I mean, like, just what are your thoughts about that?
So I think we talked about this in one of our earlier podcasts for F1 as well, which is Gasly's made himself, he's become a brand of his own in Formula One.
Yeah.
And he's one of the most followed guys in Formula One. And he's using that to his advantage because, yes, if potentially it's not, but it seems more and more unlikely because Red Bull has the biggest reserve of young drivers, which we'll talk about in a minute. But also, if he does go back, he will have to possibly play second fiddle to Verstappen.
Yeah.
Because Perez is not the youngest. He will eventually retire, so that seat opens up. But does he want to do that? Because at Alpha Tauri, he's clearly the number one driver. He's, their brand ambassador. And he can make a lot of difference and can have a bigger impact as a person on the sport, being the number one driver for that team. He can be remembered as the guy who took a midfield team and fought against the top dogs versus just being like a second driver at a big team because there were a lot of them, but we don't remember them exactly.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of young talents like this, Gasly is one, Sainz is another. Two people who are very consistent in everything they do. Sainz has leveled Charles on points during his debut season at Ferrari. I have not seen any debutant at Ferrari do that well against like a season campaigner for them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good because I think the one thing is Carlos has been moving from team to team to team. So he basically, for some drivers, it almost takes maybe a little bit less than a year to get everything's like really.
Which is what's happening with Ricardo. He's still not adjusted to his new car.
I mean, when he was with Renault, it took him like a year to get adjusted, and then that second year at Renault last season, he was bloody quick. Yeah, he understood that car, and he just drove it and because he understood more about where to brake, everything like that. But I think that's where it's for me. That's where I think Sainz is almost maybe just that little like that too good is that way he can understand all those kinds of different cars. He's understood what's it with the Renault engine when he was with when he was with not the Renault engine, the Honda Edge. When he was with Toro Rosso, and then he came to McLaren. Now he's and actually no,
he was in Renault. You were right.
Yeah, he was in Renault also. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, he was at Renault, and then he was at McLaren. Now he's here in Ferrari. So I mean, the good thing is, I think a lot of teams that if they want to take him, there's not that fear. Oh, he's gonna have a long time to get situated and everything like that. You can start expecting stuff quite quickly with him. So I think that's really good sign for him in the future. Yeah. So I think,
and speaking of young drivers, there's this new thing. So I'll just complete this point first, which is there's this new thing that's coming up, which is a lot of mentors and proteges for F1, right? Which is Hamilton is backing Norris. You could hear him, compliment Norris during the race on the team radio. You have then Alonso becoming a big fan of Russell, even though Russell knocked him out of Q2 yesterday. And Seb
Alonso
has taken
Alonso and Sainz like that because
that was there as well.
Yep.
The biggest one is obviously Sebastian taking over as a mentor for Mick. It was the first one that happened because Mick's father, obviously, we know Michael Schumacher can't support his son at the tracks, at least for another couple of years. We know why that is. But he was a big influence on Sebastian Vettel's career during his championship winning years as well. And it's great to see that Vettel's taken the onus on himself to help Mick. So I think that's a great thing we're seeing, which is the champions of the sport are actually taking youngsters under their wings or are helping them understand what it takes to be a champion.
Yeah. I think everyone wants to see this sport grow. I think everyone wants to see the sport when they retire, they want to feel that the sport is in good hands and everything like that, that there's going to be that still competitive racing, pushing it to the limit always, that kind of fight. And I think that with all that kind of mentorship that's going on, it's great to see each person's kind of that everyone has that kind of support in a sense. So that's why I'm really happy to see that. So I think we can sort of now that we've kind of hinted a little bit at it about we've talked about kind of the drivers right now, but I think we should talk a little bit more about the possible drivers of the future. These are drivers that are coming in from Formula 2. And I mean, there's quite a few. I mean, a lot of them really, really, really talented young guys. I just want to get from you straight up, is there any like names for you that are, or some drivers for you that are kind of sparking your interest? Because there's definitely a few for me. Yeah.
I've told you this before. My dream is to see the Indian flag and the Indian national anthem being played at a big Formula One race, which
Yeah.
can happen thanks to Jehan Daruwala. He's from
Yeah.
Mumbai and he won a F2 race last year.
Mhm.
He's doing decently in the championship this year. And that brings me on to another point, which is more Asian representation in Formula One. Because
Yeah.
along with him, there's also a great talent from the Renault Academy, which is Guan Yu Zhou. He's from
Yeah.
China. And these two drivers are basically more or less carrying the flag for, the Asian representation. But
Yeah.
we're seeing more of these drivers come through.
Mhm.
And again, Jehan is a Red Bull junior driver. Red Bull has a lot of talented drivers. One of them is Liam Lawson. Just came to F2 this season, has already won like 3 races, which is
Mhm.
amazing. There's
Yeah.
Yuri Vips, who's just 18 years old. He's won a couple of races. There's Felipe Drogovic, another 18-year-old with who's a multiple race winner in F2.
Yeah.
Um, Leclerc's own younger brother, Arthur
Mhm.
Leclerc, I've seen him. He's in Formula 3 and he's winning races starting from 30th on the grid,
Yeah.
which is, you just don't hear of these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
speaking of big names in F1, David Schumacher, who's Ralf Schumacher's son, so Michael Schumacher's nephew, Mick's brother, he's doing
Mhm.
really well in Formula 3. You have a lot of these sons coming up. Fittipaldi name is coming back.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of these names that are coming back into the sport, which
Mhm.
is great to see. And when I say these names, I know it goes back to kind of the nepotism debate, but what we are seeing from these guys is actually, them delivering on the big occasion, which is the exciting thing for me.
Yeah. I think the one thing is right now for me, the grid looks like right now the F1 grid right now, because it looks where you've got a mix of young drivers, you've got a mix of kind of like the kind of mid-20s, and then you've got like some of the older drivers like Alonso.
Yes.
You can even say Lewis and Sebastian Vettel right now. So I think the one thing I think we both kind of hinted before was that pushing them too fast. I like what I don't want to see is they're pushing someone like I'm just saying like a Schwartzman or Eilot. I know because they're reserve drivers.
Yeah. Again,
For
talented drivers.
Yeah, Alpha and for Alfa Romeo and Ferrari. Yeah, it's good, but what I think everyone wants to see is them really be understanding the car, to a very good degree, and then only being 100% confident that they're the ones. And it's then it's not really considered like a punt or anything. It's a practical move more or less.
Yes.
So I think that the one thing I just keep on saying this is that it's exciting. I'm really excited. We could have the first Indian. We could have the Indian national anthem maybe one day coming on the podium. We could have the Chinese national anthem with Guan Yu Zhou. We could have all these amazing kind of good.
We could have
really
had
good
the Thai anthem. We still can with Albon. That was another reason I was a little disappointed when he was dropped, because he was the only guy from Asia who was there. Well, when I say Asia, I mean like mainland Asia and Australia. Obviously, you have Ricardo. Quite a few drivers come from Australia, but and the thing is, if a country like China or India has drivers representing them in Formula One and doing well, it's good for not just the drivers, but for the fans as well as the sport.
Yeah.
Because if these two are running, you have big companies from India and China who are willing to sponsor, the teams.
Yep.
And when you're doing that, you're also opening yourselves up to, yeah, the two biggest markets in the world. China already has a Grand Prix and everything. India had
Mm-hmm.
one, and there's definitely fans which are growing. So to tap into these two markets, I'm not saying pick them up just because they're from
Mm-hmm.
these countries, but if they have the talent,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a big added bonus to make the sport more global. Because
Yep.
if we were to be honest, it's still more or less a European sport.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point because it's still more or less a European sport. I think ever since Drive to Survive came on Netflix, that attracted a whole um, American, and I mean Netflix is used all over the world, but mainly a more like an American kind of market for F1 that really started. You got these new fans that are coming in.
Yes.
So I'm just hoping that we get these more kind of diverse kind of drivers from all over the world can bring in these kind of more sponsorships as you're saying. So I think the excitement is definitely there because we could, if we have an Indian driver and Indian sponsors, we could
Mhm.
return back to India possibly for in the F1 and in
And just
F1. So
generally have more interest in the country, because
yeah,
there's a
exactly.
lot of people who India does love its sports, and I think it's good to have more sports to support because there's quite a few people. So even if some are diehard fans for just one sport, there's enough numbers to cover up for anything like F1 or
Yep.
any new sport that comes in. Definitely.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that with you have the Indian market, the Chinese market, and just seeing that how many other like the next wave of drivers also, and also I think one thing is when you get these kind of drivers who are a little bit the sons of like legends in a sense like that, that also brings in kind of maybe maybe some of the older fans who might have stopped watching F1
Mhm.
because maybe it got a bit not that interesting for them. They can see. I think there's there's part definitely in my opinion there's some fans that kind of came back because you had the Schumacher name
Back
come
into
back into F1. So you got that kind of feeling of nostalgia, and hopefully one day we might see Schumacher maybe on the top of the podium or on the podium itself. But yeah, just
in the red
I think
fire suit.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, of course, he's going to go to Ferrari. I mean, if he goes to any other team, I think, I think the entire Italy will like
Absolutely.
probably protest against that. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, so
So,
I think a very important thing to say is we are not saying get any of these drivers or having them in F1 just
yeah,
because of their name or where they come from. They have to have the talent, obviously. But so far, we've seen that there were drivers from these countries who had talent back then as well. It's just
yeah,
they didn't have that much support. Narayan Karthikeyan has finished fourth in I'm going to say controversial F1 race, but he has finished there. Karan
yeah,
Chandok, who's now an F1 pundit, he's quite well respected for his knowledge of F1 and a Williams heritage driver. He raced in F1, but never really got a chance to race for one of the big teams. So,
hmm
and China's not had great representation, to be honest, at all. So, to have these countries come up and have their drivers in actual competitive teams, if that's what the new regulation says, that no matter what team you're in, it's going to be competitive,
yeah,
then I think that's where the sport can really go towards a big global outreach, which is what we hope from the sport. It's always
hmm
nice to have more people to talk to about this great sport. So,
yep,
here's hoping. And I think with that, we've come to the end of our podcast.
hmm yep. So we'll have to see where everything we talked about, where it all leads up. Hopefully, we get some more competitive races and some
Mhm.
really, really good, interesting drivers. So thank you, everyone, from here at Run Some Acceleration, and we'll see you at our next one.